Rock solid.
All right, here we are with episode 2 of A Champion Judgment, featuring this time Malphite. I'm really excited for this one. I think it'll be. Who did we do last time? I can't believe I forgot. Oh,
Yeah, we did
Blitzcrank.
Blitzcrank.
Okay. I can't believe I forgot. Yeah.
Off to a great start, Chrissy.
Yeah, I think Malphite might be a little more interesting than Blitzcrank just because I feel like he has more places you can go with him than Blitzcrank, whereas you kind of knew Blitzcrank was going to be tied into some kind of binary kind of design, just by the way he kind of functions. That being said, I am Chrissy, and here with my patch review duo partner, Jason.
Hey, great to be with you, Chrissy. And yeah, I think Malphite was a pretty good pick you made. I definitely took him in a lot of directions. Maybe I'll be accused of getting too cute. Probably guilty as charged. But yeah, I had a lot of fun looking at the ways that we can make his kit more interesting, and very much looking forward to hearing what you came up with as well.
Yeah, I've been really busy lately, so I kind of had to finish my rest of my like 80% of what I came up with like in the last 2 or 3 hours, but I've been trying to like theory craft in my mind over like the last 2 or 3 weeks. It was kind of the middle of the month, I think, till I officially said I wanted to do Malphite. So, didn't give you as much time. With that being said, I hear you've had some health scares. How's that going?
It's going okay, man. Doctors are gonna have me do a lot more tests in a couple weeks, and hopefully from there they'll say nothing's too wrong.
All right. Well, I hope the best for you, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
All right. Let's get right back into it. We can start with like kind of our opening statements if you want. Why don't you, before we get into our designs, why don't you take the lead first?
All right, so Malphite is definitely one of those older champs that had a very simple design, and while he's been touched a little bit here and there, a lot of times throughout the years, they really haven't done anything too different or too crazy with him. He definitely doesn't have the same kind of modern design that really a lot of the champs from seasons 3 and onwards have. So he does have some fun elements going for him. First of all, he definitely is a useful teammate to have on your team. Having a super tank, having an easy engage is always great. His ultimate is a clear go button for your team. Sometimes, especially in solo queue, you're going to need that on your team. Vi is another good example of a champion with a clear go button. And it's like, okay, they press alt, and then we all pile in, and we try to make the fight happen. It is pretty fun to see your armor numbers reaching dizzying heights. You can do that as Malf.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He punishes teams who pick multiple wannabe assassins. I'm talking Kiana. I'm talking Quinn. I'm talking Talon. If you're finding all those on the same team, and that team is the enemy team, pick a Malphite into that, and it's pretty much an auto win. There's some wombo combo potential. I had that as both a fun element and a problematic element. And he's got a damn cool name. Like, I think it probably came from Malicious and Graphite. Put them together. Smack. Malphite. I love it.
Yeah.
Um, do you want me to talk about what I think is problematic, or do you want to say what you think is cool about him first?
I think you pretty much covered kind of what makes him cool, but simultaneously dated or not as engaging.
Yeah. So his Q and his W and his E really are kind of unexciting. They've made multiple good updates to them throughout the years, but they've never really put them in a situation or in a place where they have interesting gameplay scenarios or where they feel visceral. Right? It's just kind of like you use your W, you use your E. Great, they take a little bit of damage. You auto attack, they'll do a little bit more damage. Doesn't really have that punch or that impact. Only his ult has that. He has bad range, which makes his trades kind of stat checky. There's not a lot of like interesting ways if you're behind to outplay people, or ways for them to outplay you if you're ahead. I do think that he's not a particularly reliable blind pick because he relies on armor,
Mm-hmm.
and so the enemies have to have physical damage in order for Malphite to really be in a good place on your team. His ultimate offers too little counterplay for the immobile squishies. If you're an MF and the Malphite wants you dead, you're dead. Similarly, his ultimate is often used to escape, which is just kind of lame, just having his ultimate be a get out of jail free card. I made sure to get rid of that when I redesigned that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And finally, I don't think that his skills really sell his Vengeful Living Rock theme very much,
Oh,
if at all.
it looks like maybe our designs will be more similar than you thought then.
I wanted to really put him into a place where he's going to be like this angry, you know, engage, disengage tank that gets in your face and stays there.
I don't know about angry, but I got some of that.
All right, and then finally, I think that the absurd AP ratios on Q and Alt can make that kind of against type AP Malphite viable. It is fun to play, but that's not what I think Malphite was meant to be or should be in the scope of League of Legends.
I'm shocked to hear you say that. I thought we were going to have to fight about that. My design has scrapped all AP scaling.
I did put a lot of different places for him to build all different stats, but AP was not really one of them.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you. I know that you always find the AP ratios on these like AD or tank champs to be too goofy, and
Uh,
here's one place that I agree with you.
I don't mind when they're like kind of supplementary, kind of auxiliary bonus stats, but when it's like the
Mhm.
driving force behind a playstyle, like
Yeah,
Shyvana and some of the goofers,
Ivana, yeah,
I think it's a bit dumb and counter instinctual to like the design of the champion's playstyle, you know? But like what you
yeah.
said, fundamentally, I like what his abilities do, but I just think they could use more spice, more 2023.
Or even 2013.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
All right.
Well,
So should I get into the entire rework of what I did with Mouth?
sure.
All right. So first of all, I do have a couple of significant stat changes.
Should I look at the thing now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. You
Go ahead,
guys
scroll
can't see
down.
this, but just following around, I just have Malphite's champion page pulled up right now. But I will be following around on his Malphite draft.
Yeah, put out the whole document with the numbers. Because some of the numbers I think are pretty important. So what I did with the stat changes, armor, I have him getting plus 20 at level 1 and plus 30 at level 18. And magic resist plus 25 at level 1 and 45 at level 18. So in simple terms, this would make his armor and magic resist base stats the highest in the game at all levels. Additionally, I'm giving him some extra health, 200 more at level 18. But I'm taking away 20 movement speed. So that would bring him down to 315, and it would make him the slowest champion in the game, except for Dismounted Kled and Dismounted Rel. Basically, he's like that really chunky boy. You're going to have to hit him a lot of times to make him go down. But if he finds himself in a bad position, you're going to get the opportunity to just keep clinging away at him until he dies. Finally, the attack speed. I reduced this at 50% at all levels, and this will make more sense when I explain the second part of his passive in a moment.
Oh, I just like to say I didn't really think to make any stat changes. I feel like that all that's kind of nitpicky. But I
Yeah,
hear what you mean.
yeah. Normally, if it was like I'm giving him 5 more armor or something, I wouldn't even mention it. But
I
wanted
almost
to
feel like
position
he
him.
should have some ridiculously low amount of MR though, almost, you know?
So I really wanted to go into the idea that he is a utility super tank, and I didn't want it to be only against physical damage, personally. So that might be where our designs diverge a little.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So his passive, we're getting rid of Granite Shield completely. Gone.
Oh!
I know. I'm
Uh,
calling this Pressure's Forge. And
okay.
this is a two-part passive. The first
Alright.
part is that Malphite is going to gain permanent armor or magic resist when he A, kills minions or large monsters, B, engages in prolonged combat with enemy champions, or C, earns takedowns. So the stat gain from champions depends on the type of damage that they've done the most of, kind of like the way that Camille gains either a physical or a magic shield based on the type of damage they've done the most of. The stat gained from monsters and minions depends on the type of monster minion killed. For example, you kill caster minions, you get MR. You kill melee minions, you get physical. Yeah, so every 25 stat points that he gains in this way is also going to increase his size by 10% up to 200%. So he can grow ridiculously large. He's going to gain 3 armor or magic resist if he deals damage to a champion after being in combat with him for at least 3 seconds. So I think a similar kind of thing to Grasp of the Undying.
Let me
Except
stop
now
you
you're
here. When you say permanent, do you mean like
Yes.
permanent like the stats you gain from Conqueror as it's up, or do you mean permanent like he gets it for the rest of the game and keeps going?
Rest of the game, kind of like Grasp of the Undying.
Okay.
He gets 5 for takedowns on a champion or an epic monster. He gains 2 for killing a large monster. And then minions, it's going to be +1 for every 4 minions that he kills. And in doing so, I think a good Malf would be able to get a couple hundred extra armor and or magic resist through the course of the game, through his passive. Yeah?
Yeah, I gotta say these look a little too high, but I probably shouldn't talk because I have something similar in my kit.
Nice. So yeah, I'm expecting that they will get higher than pretty much any other champion in the game, and what you'll see through the course of the kit is that his damage is pretty low to compensate.
All right.
But we could always, if this ended up being just way too much scaling, we could take down the numbers. It could be 3 instead of 5 for takedown. It could be 1 per 5 minions. Finally, the second part is that his auto attack
Well, let me
is a
stop
slow.
you. I'm sorry. Let me stop you for a sec. The first part
Go
where
for
you
it, man.
says deals damage to a champion after being in combat for 3 seconds, kind of like a Conqueror
Uh-huh.
effect. Now you said it stacks up to 3 times. Does that mean he gets 9 armor and MR just by being in a fight and then being out of combat?
If he actually triggers this 3 different times, so is in combat for 3 seconds, deals damage, is in combat for another 3 seconds, deals damage, and then is in combat for another 3 seconds and deals damage, he would be able to stack it up to 3 times until he goes out of combat. Yes.
And then he would keep the 9 armor and MR permanently?
Yep.
Whoo-wee, that's crazy, son. That, in the laning phase with like the early trading with another melee champ, that would be bonkers, bro.
Yeah. I mean, if you're the other melee champion, you don't want to let him do a 9-second combat with you.
Whew, wowzers. Yeah, that's crazy, man. That's cool. Okay, I'm sorry.
And then yep, it's okay. And so I basically have these different categories of ways that he can stack those resistances, so that the Malphite in any role would at least be feasible with the passive. Right, top lane probably the best place for him since he's doing these long extended trades. Jungle not too bad since it's reasonably good stats for killing jungle monsters. And then support, probably feasible, although with a slow speed like this, and with ranged champions on the other side of that lane, it's going to be very hard for him to actually stack it a couple times without dying. He's got to take the trades wisely. Finally, the second part is that his auto attack is a slow smash that deals 200% of his total AD, plus a small 30% AP ratio to all enemies in a small circle right around him, with 60% effectiveness against minions. So the main reason I want to do this is to allow him to clear the waves a little bit better, since you'll see that his abilities do not allow him to do that. So he'll be able to hit a few minions at a time with this area of effect radius. Also, if he can just basically get in multiple enemy champions' face, he can auto, and it'll be rewarding. But the main reason for that second part is for wave clear. So yeah, this passive is going to contribute to a super scaling tank fantasy. It's going to reward him for successful trade patterns, and it's going to encourage tanky builds.
All right. I like it.
All right. Let's move on to his Q.
I just gotta laugh. What you named it was the same thing I was thinking of naming the Q.
No,
But-
seriously?
But I defaulted back to Seismic Shard because it sounded cooler.
Oh, the boulder toss or
Yeah.
the pressure sword? Yeah.
Boulder Toss.
So I'm taking this a little bit literally. So this is a new skill. It's 50 mana. It is 14-second cooldown at rank 1, but 6 seconds at rank 5. That's actually going to be the main reason that you would be ranking up this skill rather than damage, is the cooldown. And what's going to happen is, after a quarter-second channel, during which Malphite literally rips a boulder off of his own body, he throws it in the target direction to about 800 range, dealing 60 to 140 damage based on rank, plus 50% AP, and applying a 35% slow. And the length of the slow is 1.5 seconds, plus 1 extra second for every 300 bonus armor or MR he's gained through the game, or through items. And that's going to hit the first enemy that it collides with, as well as all the other enemies in a very small radius. Think like Talia's Q when she stands on Wirt's ground and throws out the boulder. And that boulder is going to persist on the terrain after he throws it for 75 seconds or until Malphite runs into it with his E.
That's cool.
Yeah. So if this skill hits a champion, Malphite's bonus armor and MR are going to be increased by 50% for 6 seconds. That's not permanent. But basically, whatever he has gained, he's going to get 50% more.
Super
And
strong late game.
yeah. Yeah. So what I think that this is going to do, is it's going to allow him to chain slow enemies for an extended trade or to help his team, particularly somebody helping gank him, run an enemy down. Remember that slow can last a few seconds if you have a lot of armor or MR on you. And the boulders can also be used to set up for his E, which I'll explain in a little bit. Importantly, this is not intended to be used for non-interactive CSing, like Mundo's Q is. And that's why I made the damage so pathetically low, even at rank 5. 140 damage is not going to be like your prime CS tool. You still have to actually wade into the wave, risk being hit a bunch of times in order to walk up and get those CS. So, any thoughts on that, or should I move on to his W?
I like how we came up with a lot of the same stuff, it looks like.
That's really interesting, because I felt like I was going in such a different direction from what he is now.
Well, you still might. Let's keep going. You still
Yeah,
might.
it's cool that you're thinking a lot of the same things that I am. Maybe it's just all those patch notes we did together, man. Our minds are melding.
There's still
Someday
time for you to get crazy. Let's see. Let's see
okay,
what
you're
else.
kicking me out of the board collective if I come up with a skill you don't like. All right. So next is his W, and this is also a new skill which I call Stone Palisade. It's got a 20-second cooldown, and it's basically a terrain creation skill, which you can use it up to 1500 range. So what this is going to be is Malphite summons a wall of stone in the target location. Think of kind of similar mechanic to Anivia's wall, except this one is only going to come up after a 3-second delay, so it's going to require a lot more foresight, but you can also use it at a much higher range. The wall has 750 to 1350 width, depending on this skill's rank, and it's going to last up to 9 to 45 seconds, again, depending on this skill's rank. Which can also be destroyed by enemies. So it's not necessarily going to last the 45 seconds if the enemies keep hitting the wall. The wall can be damaged by anybody except Malphite. And the wall is going to get health, basically based on the rank in the skill. Plus 20% of Malphite's bonus health. At rank 5, it would have 850 plus 20%.
Wow.
And it's also going to have armor and magic resist equal to Malphite's at the time that he casts this spell, and half resistance to AoE attacks. So basically, everybody can attack this wall to try and destroy it. And that's your teammates or the enemies, or they can just basically live with the wall being there and try to fight with it in their way. Malphite, on the other hand, can simply walk through the wall, destroying only the parts he walks through. So he can just basically walk right through his own wall, and that'll destroy a little segment that other champs will be able to walk through. Finally, at the moment the wall is created, so that's 3 seconds after he uses the skill, and the other champs will be able to see it coming. Enemies standing in this location will take some damage. It's 100 to 300 depending on the skill's rank, plus 60% AP, and they're knocked up for a second. That's going to be very rare, and it's mostly going to be only when you can chain stun them, like your team is going to wombo them, and then they get hit by the wall right at the end. Or if you really set up a knockback with your E or your ultimate correctly. The main use of this is as a wall to either smash people into or to block their escapes.
Feel like it's probably got too much health. No, nothing outside of like Daisy and Tibbers that's player created has like a literal health pool like that. They have just those notches that like you just lose based on like auto attacks and stuff.
Right. And I guess one of the interesting things about this one is that it will block certain skill shots, the ones that are like purely projectiles, because you're going to damage the wall as if it were a pet. So we could definitely look at taking the health of the wall down. But worth noting is that at rank 1, it's only got 250 plus 20% of Malphite's bonus health. So unless you're putting a few skill points into this wall, it will be pretty easy for your opponents to take down. You know, we're talking like one brand E.
All right.
All right. So finally, bringing some of the other skills together, his E is called Seismic Smash. And this is another new skill. It's got a moderate mana cost, 60 to 80, and 18-second cooldown at rank 1, 10-second at rank 5. And this is going to be a colliding dash skill. So Malphite is going to dash towards a target location. You can almost think of it a little bit like Poppy's dash, where she kind of drives another enemy, except it's not targeted. He can freely target this, and he can also miss. And what this is going to do is he's going to dash towards the target location, dealing 80 to 200 magic damage plus 30% AP to enemies that he hits, and driving them back another maybe 350 units. If Malphite drives an enemy into terrain, they're going to take the same amount of damage again, and they're stunned for 1 second, plus 1 extra second for every 500 bonus armor or magic resist that Malphite has. So yeah, the more resistances you stack up, the more utility you have as a CC bot as well. If this is going to be used inside the zone created by his ult, which I'll talk about in a moment, he'll drive them backwards twice as far. And yeah, you can consider this similar to Poppy's Heroic Charge, except it's freely targeted, and it's a little bit slower, there's a little bit less range. And this is kind of his bread and butter, little bit of mobility skill, since he has such slow movement speed. He's going to need some type of mobility skill to, if used well, get him out of a bad situation. It's a short dash that can allow for engages or disengages. And if you position it really well, or you combine it with the smart use of created terrain, you can use it for significant damage plus a stun as well. So it forces the enemies to be mindful of their positioning, and it allows a lot of skill, both for the Malphite player and their lane opponent. Remember that you can also knock them into just regular, League of Legends terrain to get the extra damage on the stun.
All right.
All right. So what we have so far is kind of a lot of utility in the slow and the stun, creating some terrain, but pathetically low damage for this Uber tank. Finally, we've got his ultimate. It is a new ultimate, but I did keep some elements of what he's got now. It is called Unstoppable Force, and it's 100 mana. It's got a 140 to 100 second cooldown based on its rank. And this is going to have an 1100 range, which is slightly higher than his current ultimate, but it's going to take longer for him to get there. So what he's going to do is he's going to leap into the air over 1 to 1.7 seconds, depending on the range. If you use it point blank, it'll only take 1 second. If you use it at max range, 1.7. And he's going to deal significant damage, 200 to 350 plus 70% AP, plus 40% of his bonus resists in damage to the enemies in a small circle around where he hits. I'm thinking maybe 400 or 500 radius. And knocking up all enemies in a much larger circle, about 1100 radius, for a full second. The impact is so strong that it's going to create 4 curved stone palisades in a circle surrounding that 1100 radius. So basically, if you're in that knockup radius, you're also going to be surrounded by these walls.
Wait a minute.
During the
If there's 4, wouldn't it be a square?
well, they're curved. They're curved.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're all arcs rather than lines. For all you geometry teachers out there. During the leap, Malphite is immune to CC and he takes 50% less damage. And one of the drawbacks of this is that Malphite is going to be stunned for 2 seconds after he lands, which is reduced to half a second if he dashed towards or dealt damage to an enemy champion with the ultimate. And the palisades that are created by this are basically like the ones from the W, except they have less health. So this is going to provide really good engage for your teammates, and it'll also let you get into a fight pretty quickly. Think almost like a Galio or something like that, if the fight has already started and you're a little bit behind. It's going to be an almost guaranteed knockup. So it'll allow you to follow up with E against a fleeing enemy and just knock him into the wall that you just created for a nice stun. However, the drawbacks of this, right? It's a lower speed, so the enemy has more ability to avoid the damage, especially if they've got like blinks or dashes. And due to the self-stun, this requires a lot more skill to use as a get-out-of-jail-free card. You can't just ult away from all the enemies. You can do that, but you will be stunned for 2 seconds, and they'll be able to catch up to you.
One thing, maybe I missed it, but I don't see it here. How long do the ultimate created walls last? Because surely they don't last as long as the regular W ones.
I would say they would.
I don't see it here unless I missed it.
Yeah, no, I actually didn't put that down. I would say they could last. They could last half as long as the W's does. Remember that they're gonna have such low health unless you've really ranked up that W. Meaning that you have less mobility because your cooldowns are higher on your Q and your E. You have less ability to chain slow. So you can go into that type of build if you really want, where you're creating a lot of created terrain around the map. But that means you're going to have a lot less CC.
Well, it almost feels like the power is based around the fact that you'll be maxing his W last. But I almost feel like the ultimate circle should be smaller based on points in the W because the W ranks affect the length of the walls.
Yeah, I mean, we could do something like that. The one thing is that it's kind of tricky when you're trying to design something like a small effect versus a larger effect that can trap enemies in, but they can do things like blink out of it or flash out of it. Because the question really becomes: do you want to have like a really large area that you're trapping people within, which gives them more space to move around it and to try and get away from you, but it also means that more enemies will be trapped in? Or do you want a smaller area where it's very hard to escape you, but you're probably only going to be able to like isolate one enemy in there?
All right. Well, I don't know. Did we like grade each other's Blitzcrank reworks or a scale to 1 to 10 before?
We did not. We just gave each other, our ideas on what we liked, what we didn't like, and what we might take and do a little bit differently.
All right. Well, on a scale of 1 to, we can do this from now on. A scale of 1 to 10, what did you think of my Blitzcrank rework with the overdrive mechanic and grabbing the friendly people and stuff like that?
Oh man, you're so. You just need that numerical approval, huh?
Oh no, I was gonna do yours too.
All right. I didn't ask for mine. I would have given your Blitzcrank rework an 8. I think that you would have put him in a position that was better than where he is now.
An 8. Oof,
Yeah.
that's pretty high praise. I don't want to bum you out, but I wasn't as taken with yours. I can't give it a 5 because that means I liked it as much as I dislike it. So I have to give your Blitzcrank a 4 out of 10, just
Okay.
because I feel like the abilities didn't go together as hard, and you as much admitted that yourself when you were saying it. But this one, you have my seal of approval. I like this
Oh,
idea a lot better. These abilities all go together very well. This looks like something I could actually see in the game. Your Blitzcrank one was a little all over the place. This one I actually like though. I would give this a 7.5 out of 10. I would give it an 8.5 out of 10, but I just can't stomach the fact that he scales with MR on his abilities. It's just too counter to his themes, so you miss out on the 8.5 out of 10 though.
well, thank you, sir, for the good review. And yeah, I think that's just something that we're gonna have to kind of differ on. I think of Malphite as like not only the granite, but also like the crystal. The I know that's really more of like Skarner's visual theme, but I think of him as like that type of metamorphic rock that is gonna resist anything, even heat, even
Uh,
cold. Yeah.
uh,
Um, and I would love for him to really have the spot as just kind of an in-your-face super tank that is going to set up a lot of good engages for the rest of your team,
he
while
can do
also
that.
being,
He can
yeah,
still do that, just not against MR.
I don't want him to die to one brand combo. What can I say?
That's some champions just have weaknesses, man. You don't play Twisted
Yeah.
Fate for the laning phase.
Man, there was a while you don't pick Twisted Fate for anything.
I still wouldn't.
Yeah, I don't know. Lately, like most of the Twisted Fates that I see on my team end up doing okay. I think they have just enough buffs over the last few seasons that I don't hate having him on my team anymore.
All right. Well, I'm pretty happy
Right.
with what you came up with. I feel like we had, aside from the MR thing, I feel like we had a few of the same ideas, and I think you'll find it kind of charming how we came to some of the same conclusions when I go over mine.
I can't
Hope,
wait, man.
yeah. Hopefully, as the channel grows, it'd be cool to see some feedback where people trash my idea or dumpster yours, more appropriately. So we'll see what happens.
You can never please the entire internet.
Of course not. All right, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with what you came up with.
Thanks, man. Let's hear yours.
Okay, on to the main event now. I didn't write down nearly as much stuff as you. I just kind of threw the highlights out, and I have most of it in my mind because that's just kind of how I roll. All right, first thing I'd like to say is I did get rid of some of the cheesier elements in his kit. As I said earlier, my Malphite has no AP scalings, not even like small goofy ones, so he can take advantage of like Baron Nashor buff or any of that goof shit. So my guy is kind of moved into, he's still like a super tank like yours, but he's more of kind of just a brawler, kind of singed Mundo spongy type.
Interesting.
I
So you
did.
have him kind of in the category of the champions. They're going to be disruptive, but it's more about like the tanky damage they can deal.
He's more of kind of a long-term duelist. I lost a little bit of CC with my design, and I brought up the tankiness more.
All right.
And one big thing, my Malphite has lost the go button because I wanted to give him something more in line with, I don't know, just fighting and being tankier and being more. You mentioned like that angry ground like monster theme. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that was something. Mine's more a rock monster LARP than the go button.
Sounds good. Yeah, because especially when he's dashing now, and it is a fun skill to use, right? It almost seems like you're just a little thing flying through the air, and then just everything pops up when you get there.
Yeah, I want people to have to think more, and I want the enemies to have to think more, and I want it to just be more cerebral. So, but we'll
Yeah.
get there when we get there. Okay, first up, My granite shield has been enhanced. My granite shield is a core part of his ability. Off with the pressure forge, in with the new
How
granite
dare you?
shield. All right, now it still is all about the shields, but it's a lot more interesting. All right, see, the way it is I kept the original passive shard of the monolith where he gains size based on armor, because that's just good fun.
Hmm.
I didn't change the numbers on like his stats, his base stats, like you did, because I think fundamentally those are in a good place. I think his abilities are enough to, change his direction. I don't think he's got some deep glaring stat flaw in his kit or anything like that in terms of his base stats. So the way it works, my granite shield upgrades itself at 6, 11, and 16, the same ranks you get your ultimate, and what it does is on a 30, 25, 20, and 15-second cooldown, he gets a shield for 5, 10, and 15, and 20% of his max AP, or HP, I mean. And now,
HP.
yeah, that's a lot in the late game, but it won't be as good early on. Now, here's the big kicker. Any instance of physical damage reduces the cooldown by 1 second. So when this gets down to like 15 seconds, and he's getting hit by all kinds of physical shurikens and talons rake and all auto attacks and stuff, he'll get the shield back much quicker in the late game.
Okay, so it sounds like if he's like in the middle of a fight, he's gonna be able to just get multiple shields within the middle of that fight if he's getting plinked a bunch.
Exactly. He no longer has to be out of combat to regenerate Granite Shield.
Okay.
So it's going to be like, whoa, he's got a shield random. Oh, whoa, he's got another one, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Think of it as kind of Maokai's passive, but a shield instead of a heal, basically, And he doesn't have to do anything like auto like Maokai has to do. He just gets it.
There's gonna be so many carriers that just like blow a gasket and have an aneurysm as they think they're about to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
They fade away with the final shot, and he just randomly gets that shield again.
I have a little caveat that in my thing here, my notepad thing here, I didn't write a lot. I just wrote little tips to remind me, where if it's like about to, if it's like on cooldown and he takes damage, it'll trigger before the damage would apply. So it'll save him from dying if the shield will, whatever. It just he gets it when it's off cooldown. I think you know what I meant. Okay, now, oh yeah, Granite Shield also comes into play with my W too. And okay, next up we got Seismic Shard. I was flirting with the Boulder Toss too, because I do have a boulder in my kit as well. Okay, so my Seismic Shard is no longer a projectile, so it's not quite as annoying to work in his laning phase. But here's the thing. My Malphite is a bit of a pushover in the early game. He takes a while for that steam to start piling on before he becomes a powerhouse. My Malphite's still going to get kind of bullied in the laning phase, kind of like the Malphite now. But he's got a lot to look forward to. Now, the way my Q works is it'll always do, based on ranks, 4 to 8% of the target's max health plus 4 to 8% of Malphite's max health. Now, the only reason this isn't broken is my Q has no base damage.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
So it'll always scale with his target and his own health pool.
And this is max health, not current health, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you're definitely going to want to use this against the Cho'Gaths, Mundos, Dariuses of the world that are building a lot of health.
Well, I kept the slow, so it's still kind of his chase potential.
Okay. And you said that it's not a projectile. It's like an auto attack modifier, or what is the mechanic?
No, he still kind of throws it. It's a line skill shot, and what it does is it only does 50% damage to minions. I don't want him to have like insane wave clear because that's a little silly for a tank. And it only does 50% damage to champions if the champion isn't the first target hit. So if you hit them through the minion line, it only does half damage. You gotta have
which would still be decent.
What?
Which would still be a decent amount of damage against the right champ.
Yeah, but you can't just like harass them effortlessly like you do now, where no matter where they are, you just Q lock and it rolls towards them.
Okay. So this is definitely encouraging them to build a lot of health instead of just stacking armor.
Yep.
What is the? Oh, you said 48%. Is that the way that it increases by rank?
Yep. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 5.
Okay. Yeah, this still feels like one that you'd probably. I haven't heard your W or your E yet, but it sounds like one that you probably would not want to skill or at least max very early.
No, you'll probably still want to max this first.
Mm-hmm.
I lowered the mana cost a little bit, so it's easier for him to use early on to compensate
Yeah.
for not having any base damage. This also doesn't scale with AP or anything either. Doesn't even scale with his armor.
Right. If you wanted to make it, or at least if you wanted to encourage players to max it first, a skill like this, you might add some type of base damage, or you might,
Oh, I didn't finish. I didn't finish the queue yet. I'm still got more.
Oh, sorry, I thought that
All
was
right.
it.
Here's the thing. Also, since it's a projectile, the Q does 25% bonus damage if it travels through terrain,
Oh,
and it
cool.
grows in size, but it only can grow once and gets 1 damage amp if it goes through terrain.
Okay.
So that's 25% bonus damage on both like the health ratios. So that'll pack a little bit more punch. It has the same slow still and the same range as its current Q. And the same cooldown of 8 seconds. Also, the one thing I did remove, it no longer steals the target's movement speed. So you don't gain movement speed, you just slow them with the same slow still.
Okay. That sounds pretty good.
Oh,
The one
I'm not
issue.
done yet. I'm not done yet.
My bad, Chrissy.
Okay. And here's the big kicker. At rank 5,
Mhm.
Seismic Shard, he can hold down the Q. If there's terrain directly behind Malphite, he can hold down the Q to grab with both hands a chunk of the terrain and launch it as a seismic boulder at the target
Oh, that's
for
cool.
double the damage and range, but it also doubles the cooldown. So from 8 to 16 seconds if he chooses to do the boulder. It
Okay.
removes the slow component entirely, but it shoots the boulder in like a circular area at the target, similar to it's going to work similar to Gragas's ultimate, and it'll knock them
Uh,
away from the point of impact, but only about 30% as much as Gragas's does. And
that,
the large boulder though, every time it travels through terrain, the damage and size increase by 10%. So in some times you can probably get this through 3 different walls with double the range in some
well,
places on the
especially
map.
if you're like if you've chipped off a few pieces of the wall and they stay like chipped off for a long time, you could theoretically create like 5 or 6 little grooves that it would pass through.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a few abuse cases where it would be really good.
Uh huh.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's really interesting. I know that Riot has actually talked about because Talia originally had a an ultimate where she would, I think, remove certain parts of the terrain, and they were saying that based on the way the game is coded, they actually found that would be extremely hard to do and require, multiple times the amount of terrain programming that they already had in there.
that makes sense.
Um, yeah, but if we're not looking at it from like the programming feasibility, and we're just looking at it like, would this be cool to have in League? I have to say, 2 thumbs up. That would be very nifty.
Well, you might have misunderstood. He doesn't do anything to the terrain. The projectile just gains strength by traveling through terrain.
Oh, I thought you said he actually rips off a chunk of the terrain
Well,
and
what?
makes part of the terrain go away.
No, 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 no. I never said it
Oh, it's
makes
just crap.
terrain go away. It's a cosmetic
Okay.
kind of cool
I see.
geomancer looking thing where he just grabs part of the terrain and uses it as a
Nice.
rock or
So almost
a
like the way
boulder.
I had him grab it off his own body.
Think of it as like Avatar earthbending nonsense.
Right. So the terrain will still look exactly as it did after he
Yes,
uses the skill, but it'll look the animation will look like he's like grabbing a huge boulder off of the wall and then chucking it.
exactly.
Okay, that sounds pretty cool. I like it, man.
That's his going to be like his bread and butter like Q kind of thing. But keep in
Yeah.
mind, if you choose to do the boulder, you're on the much longer cooldown now.
And I like that you have the bonus for rank 5 because otherwise, there would be very little reason I think to keep skilling this up in the early levels because at level 9, you and your opponent aren't going to have that much bonus health. To take advantage of the scaling of this skill. And then in addition to that, most skills will do more than twice as much damage at rank 5 as they'll do at rank 1. So it seemed like the scaling by rank wasn't very good until you added that rank 5 bonus in.
Yep. Okay, next up is his W, and I have renamed this Greater Thunderclap from regular Thunderclap.
That is original.
Well, it comes into play. You'll see what I mean. All right, now here's how this works. If you know anything about Galio, this is going to be similar to Galio's Colossal Smash passive. And every time Granite Shield's cooldown is up or is refreshed, he gains 1 stack of Greater Thunderclap, and then he immediately readies a regular Thunderclap, which is going to be identical to his current Thunderclap's active. And that applies on his next auto. It does the same current damage and scaling with no AP as his current Thunderclap does, with all the same trimmings and effects and all that. And that's the passive part of the kit. He gets that every time his Granite Shield is renewed by, like, getting beat up on. And that's his next auto that applies on. And then, at 3 Greater Thunderclap stacks, he can turn this into an active to use Greater Thunderclap. And basically what that does, it's a regular one, but it has 60% bonus damage of the regular Thunderclap. But it applies all the effects of Malphite's current Ground Slam on his E. But it's a 5-second cripple instead of 3, and it's a 70% cripple instead of 50. This is the only... I noticed you stripped away his attack speed thing. I wanted to keep that in the game because mine's more of an AD bully. I wanted to keep... just like my Blitzcrank, I wanted him to be a natural evolution of the current Malphite. So I kept the cripple, but it's not a trading tool anymore. He can only pull this out with 3 stacks of it by his passive being triggered multiple times, and then he gets to pull out the much stronger cripple. So it'll be way more juicy when it does get you.
So since I don't have anything in front of me, just remind me one more time. This is an auto attack modifier, or this is some type of like skill shot like Galio's.
It's just like Galio's passive isn't a skill shot. It just modifies his next auto attack when his Granite Shield refreshes.
He's passive. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right.
But he doesn't have to use the greater one. He can sit on that with 3 stacks. And every time he refreshes his Granite Shield, he'll still use a regular one. So he can combo a regular, and then if he's got 3, he can immediately activate on his next auto, and it's an attack speed reset thing. So he can go boom, boom right away, and immediately do the second Thunderclap, which has the effects of Ground Slam with the cripple and the AoE damage circle and all that.
That's interesting. And then you said he gets his stacks through either using the W or by getting his passive.
No, he only gets stacks when Granite Shield is refreshed.
Oh, only when he gets the passive. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So that would be a really good tool in the large team fights, which I think is a good place for Malphite.
Well, Greater Thunderclaps are going to be a little more rare in the laning phase because that's the point in the game where his Granite Shield is on a higher cooldown.
Yeah, and you're not being hit by as many enemies.
Yeah.
So this is still probably his bread and butter wave clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess you're right. His wave clear did take a bit of a hit in my kit. You're right. But I don't think it's a huge problem for a tank to have shitty wave clear. I feel like a lot of them do. So
yeah, you've always got to be careful looking at the top lane champs because the lane is so long and you can be bullied if you go in to take a minion out and then you just get hit a few times or someone starts chasing you. Which I think is fine if he provides enough utility or damage or just overall power to the team late game. It's okay if he can get bullied.
Yeah, plus keep in mind my Q has a really low mana cost. I only have it at 25 mana, so he can still throw the things through the lane. Just does half damage.
Yeah, that's true. Alright, yeah, that skill's not bad. It's definitely more interesting than his W currently is. I've always been more in the school of just like, let's replace the W with something more interesting. And the fact that yeah.
Rest of my stuff are new stuff, so I did scrap everything else.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely made the W more interesting than it was. I wonder whether it would be some way to make the W to give Malphite more agency in stacking up to get that greater Thunderclap. That's probably the one change that I would make. Maybe make it so if you hit, an enemy champion or even more than one enemy champion, he'd also get a stack.
Well, I didn't want him getting the enhanced cripple because cripple is a very powerful effect too many times.
Uh-huh. Okay, so you want this to be something he will almost never get in lane.
No, I mean he'll obviously get it because it's inevitable he'll get lots of
He'll
stacks.
eventually stack,
Since
yeah.
he doesn't have to be out of combat anymore, it's inevitable that he'll get it pretty, frequently still.
Okay.
Just not like crazy frequently like his regular thunderclap.
Yeah.
Also, one thing I did mention, this no longer grants all of the huge bonus armor that he gets just by putting points into thunderclap or having triple as much when granite shield's active. But in my next skill, I compensated for that. And this is where we kind of had the same idea of infinite scaling.
So tell me about it.
All right, my next E, since I combined Ground Slam into Greater Thunderclap, the next skill is a complete reworked. I just called this one the Mountain. What do you think of that?
I think you're a big Game of Thrones fan if you're calling it that.
Oh, you're right. There is the huge dude in that show. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Mountain that walks, man.
Yeah, that's the guy who looks like a zombie at the end. I remember. All right. I didn't think of that when I came up with this. I just thought he was a rock and mountains are strong.
He is the mountain that walks, though.
All right. So this is kind of mostly a defensive tool, but it is what allows him to kind of keep chucking along and stay in your face and make him somewhat relentless, even though he's a bit lacking on the damage side in the early portions of the game. But he's going to scale brilliantly with his Q damage with all the max health shred and scaling on it. So I don't think he actually needed a ton of damage in his kit between the Thunderclap and the Seismic Shards and his E. And I'll explain why in a second. So what happens here is his E is initially deactivated. He can only activate it when his Granite Shield is active. So there's a few things to play into Granite Shield, and all of my abilities at least mention or refer to Granite Shield in some capacity.
Okay, so he can't use his E unless Granite Shield is currently active and he has the shield from it?
As long as it has at least 1 HP on the shield, he can use Granite Shield. Or, I mean, the Mountain. The Mountain. And this is the active portion that's initially turned off. Okay, so when Granite Shield does have an active shield, he can choose to remove 80% of the current shield to cleanse any slows and grants himself 50% tenacity for the next 3 seconds and 50% movement speed for 1 second. And so it doesn't get too crazy. He can only use this once per unique instance of Granite Shield. Otherwise, it has no cooldown. It has no cooldown otherwise. So in the late game, when Granite Shield's going to come off cooldown a lot faster, this is going to be able to be used a lot more to shake off slows and half of the incoming CC.
So the cooldown on this literally is Granite Shield.
Yes, you could say
Remind us one more time what the cooldowns were on Granite Shield and the cooldown reduction from being hit.
It scales at level 1 and then each point in your ultimate at 1, 6, 11, and 16. And it starts with a 30-second cooldown, and then it's only 15 at rank 16. And any instance of physical damage, that includes dots or area of effect. So if you stand in something, it's to your advantage. And
most dots are magic anyway.
Yeah, that's true. And it reduces the cooldown by 1 second.
Okay.
But considering the amount of autos and abilities that are going to be flying around in the second half of the game, I think that would be pretty strong.
Yeah, that'll be pretty low cooldown. Of course, when those autos and abilities are flying around, your shield's also going to pop pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's true.
When you get to like a really late game.
This is a risk-reward thing where you lose 80% of the shield to get the chase potential, essentially. And
how do you benefit by ranking this skill up?
Oh, it does. I didn't mention that. I haven't finished reading the rest of it. Yeah. It does damage equal to 25% of the shield consumed, plus a percentage of his total armor, and that goes up by ranks in the ability. It's like 5 to 25% of his total armor, plus the amount of the shield consumed. So,
and that's dealing damage to everyone in like a small to medium area?
Pretty small circle, probably just smaller than his regular ground slammed is today.
Okay, cool.
Otherwise, yeah, no cooldown, so it'll be better in the late game, but you want to take 1 point in it just so you can shrug off those slows instantly when you want to, make a getaway and stuff like that. And of course, it gives. Don't forget about the 50% tenacity for 3 seconds after you
That's pretty big,
turn it
yeah.
on. Yeah.
Something that I really like about this, and I guess it's something that I didn't even really mention much as a point of emphasis when I was talking about my rework of Mouth, was that there aren't that many champs in the game where they have defensive tools that require a lot of skill to use. They've added a few more of them recently. Obviously, like Garen's W is a good example of that. Poppy's entire kit really is defensive tools that require skill. But especially for these older champs that came out many years ago, it was at a time where they weren't thinking about how can we make every champ a skillful or an interesting experience. And anytime I hear defensive tools that require skill to use, such as this, this ability to, very rapid fire, try and get the shield, and then cleanse yourself of the elements or of CC,
The mountain.
and be a mountain, of course. One thing that I don't like about it is that, again, you don't really get to control that much when your shield comes up. So between this and the W, I think there really is a lot of room to make your kit better by adding some way for Malphite to gain his granite shield by doing something cool. Whether that's by maybe hitting an enemy without any minions in the way with his Q, whether that's using his W on 2 or more champions, just something where he can actually say, okay, I need my shield right now, let me make that happen. And then not only does he get his shield for a defensive tool, but he also would be able to use that if he's immobilized a second later to get out of it with his E.
I hear what you're
feel like-
saying, but if there was another way to reduce his Grant shield, I feel like it would be too obnoxious for him to get that strong of a shield up that much more faster in the late game. And I maintained his kind of bit of a weak laning phase because I think that makes him more balanced when I read the rest of his kit on how he scales.
Yeah, and maybe that's just a different difference of philosophy. But I was thinking, you could increase the base cooldown and then give him more ways to lower it.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. Overall, though, I think this is pretty cool. Anything else before the ult?
No, I have the passive of his E now.
Okay.
And this is the infinite scaling thing that makes up for him losing that huge flat armor bonus. This doesn't work the same way as yours. This is kind of just a set it and forget it thing. This is kind of just an inevitable fat slob mechanic. I called it unstoppable. And it works kind of just like, think of Yasuo's passive, where when he moves, he gains stacks of flow, and over time that builds his flow meter and he gets that shield. Where the way this works, he gains stacks of unstoppable for every unit traveled, up to 1,000, and he gains twice as many when he's moving next to terrain. And at 1,000 stacks, he gains 1 stack of unstoppable, and each stack of unstoppable grants him a total increase of 2.5% armor. So, as he's running around the map doing stuff or walking back and forth in the lane or coming back from the fountain, he'll get these stats pretty fast because 1,000 units to travel isn't that too terrible much in the game. And you could, I'm not an expert on how the math works with like the units traveled kind of thing, so you might have to tweak this a bit. But he should be able to get this up to like some pretty crazy numbers by like, a 20-30 minute game if each stack is giving him 2.5%, and if he's smart about always walking along walls and traveling down the river next to like the river wall and all that kind of stuff, he'll get it twice as fast, and then his total armor hopefully will increase by like 50, 100, 150, 200% towards the end of the game, and this will bring him more in line with your infinite scaling mechanic, at least in terms of armor.
All right, so the numbers are definitely too high on this one. If you look at a champion's movement speed, for example, most of them will generally have somewhere around 400 once you get your boots, I think, or a little bit less than 400. That is the number of units you move per second. So if he's near the wall, he'd be essentially be getting 800 units towards his 1,000 units for a stack every second.
All right.
Um,
Well, that part of it wasn't hugely consequential. I just kind of threw a number out there for the hell of it. The gist of it is like he gets stacks by moving, and when he accrues
okay.
enough of them, he gets one stack of unstoppable that gives him bonus armor.
Yeah. So yeah, if we actually used your numbers, he'd be gaining about 125% bonus armor every minute of the game.
Yeah, that's obviously crazy. I was thinking more like 10. I was thinking more like 20% every like 5 minutes or something like that. I don't
Okay.
know.
So yeah, I mean, if you made it something like if you made it something maybe every 20,000 units that he travels, instead of every 1,000, I think you'd be working with about those numbers.
Whatever gets him to some fantasy crazy value of like 300% armor. I
Okay.
didn't put a lot of thought into like the distance units travel or whatever. Just something that's like you can see constantly ticking at the bottom of your screen and make you feel good that like, ooh, I'm about to get another stack. That's cool. Something like
Yeah.
that.
It's cool that that it makes him move in certain ways. There could be an argument that's more of a chore outside of combat than something that you really take pleasure in doing.
I think it's pretty mindless, if you like commit to playing him. Okay, I'll walk back to lane next to the wall. It's not a big deal.
Right, right. Even in your gang pass, you can go next to the wall, or you don't have to for 30 seconds. It's not going to hurt you that badly. So that is a lot of armor. If you're giving him like 200% bonus over the course of the game, given that he can still build, especially if he sees a lot of AD on the enemy team, you know, 300 or so bonus armor in his items. Yeah, you're going to be easily getting over 1,000 in a 30 to 35 minute game.
Okay,
Which means the opponents better have some way to attack you that's not just physical damage.
that's fine
Um,
because my guy's really only meant to counter physical damage.
it means that you probably need to take little things away from the rest of the kit. And maybe the ultimate is where you're taking a lot away from. Let's hear what you're doing with the ultimate.
Yeah, so my ultimate is not really burst. It does some damage, but it's not the greatest. And okay, here's what we go. This is Power of the Monolith, what we got here. And this is pretty crazy. You might be surprised how far out there I went with this. It's more utility, if anything else. I did kind of maintain like his kind of escape potential ish with it, but that's not really its purpose. This is kind of a team fight thing only. Like the rest of my kit, it does kind of suck early, but it'll scale like a beast. And that was all about my kit for him to be kind of this unstoppable, inevitable slob force. I totally
Mhm.
hear what you're saying about like he doesn't have a lot of decision making when it comes to like when he can ready his W and his E, but I feel like a lot of that is compensated about just how quickly his passive can become kind of obnoxiously strong, and the ridiculously large health scaling I added to his Q, where it scales off of him and his target's max health. So I feel that makes up for a lot of his other lacking power, and I didn't want him to
Yeah.
have crazy amounts of damage, but he still has good damage though. Alright, so what this does is when you activate Power of the Monolith here, Malphite he gets absorbed by the ground and becomes untargetable for 3 seconds. And he instantly refreshes Granite Shield when he does this, when he goes under. And he becomes untargetable for 3 seconds. And here's the fun part. Within 1,000 units of where he went into the ground, in like kind of a circular area based on where he went in, maybe
Hmm.
1,000, maybe 1,500, something like that. Pretty big area, like big enough to encompass like a whole team fight kind of spot. Copies of him start emerging all at once, come out of the ground, but at random places in the circle. He can't predict where they are, but no two copies will be within like 300 or 400 range of each other. So random
Okay.
copies of him come out of the ground and emerge at random locations. Now here's
The
the
little
thing.
Malphite Juniors.
No, 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 no. They all look just like him.
Oh, they're
These
really big.
Yes, they're all big too. Now, these copies, they only do 20% of Malphite's damage, and they can also cast Thunderclap. Or they use Thunderclap too, but since it only does 1/5 the damage, it's not as crazy. And they also have Granite Shields, but their Granite Shields are actually an illusion, so you can't tell them from the real one's Granite Shield that just got refreshed. And this is how this thing gets crazy and works with the way the Mountains passive functions. The number of copies Malphite summons is 1 per 100 total armor that he has.
Okay.
And it lasts for 3 seconds plus 1 second also per 1 total 100 armor that he has. So when he first gets a point in this at level 6, by default he'll only have like 1 copy. And the way these work is the copies will automatically engage the last champion you hit or the closest enemy champion. Just like most smart things in the game like that. And all of the copies are treated as champions for the purposes of all of the abilities that can run into stuff and hit champions like Caitlyn's ultimate, all that kind of stuff.
So, the thing about this skill, and I'm not sure whether I hate it or I love it, but if you have that many, like, not many Malphites,
they're really
actual,
big, right? Yeah, they're
full-size
really big.
Malphites, yeah, this guy has already grown large, during the game. And he has a pretty large model to start with, right?
I did think of what you're about to say, but I mentioned in the passive text, his size only gets as big as it currently does. I didn't make it scale infinitely or whatever. So he never gets that crazy silly large.
But like I said, you're going to very possibly have over 1,000 armor in a normal length game, meaning there's going to be 10 different Malphites walking around. You're gonna not only screw with other people's pathfinding, your allies and your enemies quite a lot, but you may actually just pinch them in to where they can't move.
No,
they're not stunned, they're not immobilized, they just can't move anywhere because they're surrounded by 4 giant Malphites.
To clean it up a bit, that is why I stated earlier that none of them can spawn right next to each other. They all have to spawn like 200 or 300, 400 units apart from each other. So there'll never be a time where like 5 of the 3 or 4 of the bunch all spawn like right on top of each other or anything.
But you still have like 17 champs within this area. In a way, I love it. It's like, you want to move? That's cute.
I still got a little bit more of it to go though.
Yeah. A question for you. You said that Malphite absorbs into the ground and becomes untargetable for 3 seconds?
Yes, and that's as soon as he goes into the ground, that's when all of the copies come out of the ground.
But why is it so important that you can't tell them apart when they're all copies and none of them are the real thing?
Well, let me read the rest of the ability and you'll find out.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, now, when he goes into the ground, all of the copies that spawn will match his current stats. Kind of like Wukong and Shaco's clone and stuff like that. And with this, that's the first active. Just like Nocturne's ultimate, it has a second active where during the 3-second untargetability window, he can choose to assume the form of any of the copies and replace his current HP with the current HP of one of the copies. So if he got a lot lower or stuff like that, he can switch his health with one of the copies after staying on the ground for a while. And
does he change it?
Yeah, he just swaps the current health percentage with the Malphite clone that he assumes the form of. No other stats kind of move around.
He doesn't take their position?
No, he does take their position. He assumes
that's cool.
Yeah, he assumes their form, so he can be any of the copies. So
there's less taking their health and more becoming them instead of him.
Yeah, and he gets 90% damage for 1 second after assuming the form of one of them. If he does choose to assume the form, he can just stay underground for the 3 seconds. If he swaps into one of the dummy Malphites, all the clones will expire in 3 seconds if the remaining duration is greater than 3 seconds.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of randomness to the ability because it's random where the clones spawn when they're summoned. So this can be an escape tool, but only if you get a little lucky and it spawns like ahead of you or something. Otherwise, it can be a bit random. I didn't want it to be as brain dead as his current ultimate, so...
Really interesting. Yeah, you made it into an almost entirely defensive ultimate.
Well, no, all the Malphites still have all of his stats.
That's true. They do
His
have some damage on them.
Yeah, they all have auto attacks. They all have thunderclap. They just only do 20% of his damage.
Yeah.
And they're all
That's,
still fat, have a lot of health. They all still take the same amount of
they
damage.
also
So
slow people if the thunderclap is empowered.
that's not a slow. It's a cripple, and they only have regular thunderclap. Only the Q
Isn't it?
slows.
Oh, the cripple meaning the attack speed reduction.
Yeah, that's
Got it.
only greater thunderclap. They only use regular thunderclap because that signifies that their granite shield is up. So that's something the regular Malphite would have right away because his granite shield is refreshed. So there's no way of knowing if he assumed the form right away or he's been underground the whole time.
That's actually something interesting. I didn't think of it before because I was thinking of the cripple as a slow. But does Malphite even want to have in this form? Does he even want a cripple in his kit when he really wants people to be plinging him as fast as possible to get his shield back up?
That's true, but it's still gonna be
It'll
beneficial
still
for you
reduce
to be
damage
taking
by a
less.
lot.
Yeah, by taking less
That's true.
damage.
And then it'll also protect your allies by proxy.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, that's the whole thing.
So that is quite an ult he's got there, creating 10 different Malphites that can all damage and cripple
Well,
the enemies.
it'll only be 5 to 10 Malphites if the game goes on for 45 plus minutes or so. Most of the time, it's only going to be 3, 4, 5. Something like that. Takes a
Yeah,
while to get 6 items and to stack up the mountain thing.
that's true. But
My
I
my
think like
Malphite's all about the scaling.
yeah, no, this is an absolute late game monster. Not only with a bunch of general utility in his kit, and a reasonable amount of damage, but also one that will basically be unkillable, like that 9,000 HP Cho'Gath late game.
Well, he doesn't have anything that gives him extra health, just extra armor. So maybe you
Right.
will want to take Heart Steel or whatever the hell it's called.
Oh yeah, I would think he would definitely build Heartsteel, particularly because that's going to make his Q more powerful too.
Yep.
But I'm just saying, like the armor is essentially effective health against physical damage.
Yep.
So I think he might even be harder to kill than that 8,000 HP Cho'Gath that actually only has like 120 armor and a 100 magic resist. It's pretty cool. Overall, I think the Q and the R are definite high points of your kit. I think they're both very cool. I think the Granite Shield is interesting, and like I said before, what I really wanted to have on that passive are more ways to give Malphite the ability to bring it up on command or at least quicker.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I do think the kit is a little bit overloaded, particularly late game, in that its damage, its tank, and its utility, and the tank is probably to a level that no one else in the game has.
Well, he doesn't have that much CC, mind you.
Um, So he's got what? He's got the slow on his Q, the cripple on his W,
That's only
and
great.
yeah,
That's only greater Thunderclap, though.
yeah, and I guess he does lose the knockup, right? So he really
Yeah,
is kind of more in that Mundo League. Yeah, I agree. Maybe it's not as overloaded as I thought. It's just
and
very, very powerful late game.
only the rank 5 Boulder has the knockback. Otherwise, it's just a slow.
I like this, man. I'll give you another 8. Like this is original. This this is puts him into a place that I think would be fun to play, both for the Malphite player and, unless the other team picked wannabe assassins, probably for the other team to play around. I do think that the numbers would need to be tuned down. My guess is it would probably be coming out in an OP state. But
No, I think one of the fun things about him is
yep.
he'll be so humble in the early game. It'll take him a long time to become obnoxious. He's not going to be just broken at level 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, or whatever.
No, he's
He's
certainly
going to
not.
be very He's going to be very weak and vulnerable in the early game.
Is he really killable at that stage though by most champions?
Oh yeah, I think without the
Maybe.
huge flat bonus that he gets from his old W, his armor will not be hugely impressive in the early of the game. But his Q damage will always assure that he can at least do some chump damage, and it scales brilliantly, so that'll be really good later on. So
Yeah, this definitely feels to me probably the most like Mundo of any champion in the game that's currently out there that I can think of. And I know you're not a big fan of the new Mundo rework, but I like it.
It's grown on me a little bit, but yeah, I still think the old one was better.
This feels like a better version of that, honestly.
Well, he
Um,
has no heals, mind you, so you know, take it for what it's worth.
True, but he also has all those thousands and thousands and thousands of effective health against physical damage, at least.
Yep, and
That's interesting.
that's what I felt his theme was, so that's what I wanted his evolution to be.
I wonder how much MR people would put into a kit like that just to compensate, and make sure that he could survive the one or two magic damage champions in the other team.
Well, that's the thing. If
Yeah, again,
if you
balancing that.
enjoy playing him, and his as long as you build health, his Q will still be effective. But if you're blind picking them, then his ultimate can only be so strong because it needs armor to scale in duration and doubles and clones and stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a kit you would only want to take into heavy AD damage,
well,
but you
yes,
also
but if you just
yeah,
like playing him and the game goes on long enough, he's still getting the unstoppable stacks from roaming the map and stuff. So he's
you'll eventually
basically
get it.
guaranteed to always accrue at least 3 or 4 clones on his ultimate over time.
Very good, very good.
I wanted him to be kind of someone who gets pushed around in the early game like Nasus, and then after like 20, 30 minutes, suddenly you're like, oh, I shit my pants. He's been walking around the map. He's been building up the mountain. He's got all these clones now. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think it's cool how we both kind of looked into the fantasy that you want as Malphite is to be able to scale into the late game and be that nigh unkillable tank that can do something cool, in a team fight for your team. And yeah, we kind of went different ways with what you do besides being tanky. You went more for the damage and zone of threat. I went more for actual like terrain area control.
yeah, yours
And
is way more CC heavy than
ability.
me.
Yeah, I definitely went for more CC in those team
Yours
fights
is
late
more
game.
of a playmaker. Mine's kind of like a fighter and a fat slob. You know.
Yeah, yeah, I think like almost like we could look at like Poppy versus Mundo as a good analogy for it. They're both that great tank that your team wants in the late game team fights, but they do it in such different ways. Good stuff, man. I'm glad we're doing this series.
Yep. I had the idea of making Granite Shield for like a few weeks being a big part of the kit, but I didn't come up with the rest of it until like 2 hours ago.
All right.
I knew I wanted his ultimate to be something that was totally different from his current ultimate. Other than that, I was pretty happy for everything else just to be a lot cooler.
As far as the next champion I'm gonna pick, because I think we should definitely keep going with this series. I'm enjoying it a lot. I hope you are too. Um, Let me give you a little hint without giving it away. It's a champion with a cheesy glass cannon build that I think is one of the most problematic champs in the game.
Well, you're gonna have to tell me at some point.
Yep. I'll give you a few weeks to get ready for it, and I guess we'll do the next one at the beginning of September.
Yep, sounds
By
good.
the way, have you had the chance to check out Arena?
No, didn't really seem interesting to me.
I've actually been playing that more than Rift in the last few weeks. I think they did a great job. It's staying fun, and there's really more champions and more combos of champions that are effective than I ever thought there would be for a 2v2 skirmish mode like this.
Yeah, I could see having fun playing it with like Johnny and Joey, Johnny's brother, his girlfriend, and some of my close friends and stuff. But I don't know. I've just been really enjoying playing classic WoW and making a lot of friends and leading the guild and stuff like that.
I'll
So
join you for that too if I can sometime soon. But
that'd be
yeah,
awesome.
check out Arena. It's better than you think.
I might check it out.
All right, man. So I guess we'll be back for patch 13, 15 when it hits, and see you next time.
Yep, gotta do it. See you guys.